So about a month ago, I made a what if Paper Mario was in Super Mario Maker 2 video that was a little bit different to my usual format. I found a particularly interesting Twitter image that played around with the idea, and I decided to use that as a kind of stepping stone to then talk about how a Paper Mario style could work in Super Mario Maker 2 and make it a full-on speculative idea video of what could potentially work. And that video clearly has been doing very well. It for some reason has been gaining more steam even recently. And just around the same time, I also managed to find another fan image on Twitter that inspired me even more. This time being created by Knight, who you may have heard of as she's been in all sorts of other projects that are quite well known on the internet. This time giving us what could potentially be a new HD remake rendition of Paper Mario the Thousand Year Door. And that got me thinking. Obviously, the demand for more Thousand Year Door is behemothly high. It's one of the best Paper Mario games there are, and it's very clearly the fan favourite across the whole franchise. So why don't we humour the idea that a Paper Mario Thousand Year Door remake is coming to fruition? That now begs the question, what is there to be improved? Let's talk about the visuals first and foremost, since it's the easiest one to go on, and hey, I have some sort of image that I can go and sync the audio with. For the basics, obviously, it's gonna be in HD. Obviously, that's the whole point of the remake in general, and Paper Mario Thousand Year Door was created in like 2001, 2002. It's an old game, very standard definition, and a lot of the sprites do look very JPEG-y. It can very much do with a simple sprinkler that will make everything a lot more top-notch and high quality. Additionally, and this is more of a directorial approach, but it would make sense considering the later Paper Mario games, just like Knight has done here, we can add some IRL paper materials to many of the textures to make it seem more like it is some kind of papercraft world, but not exactly betraying the whole world building of the Paper Mario Thousand Year Door game's miniature little world. It would be the most logical direction that a new Paper Mario remake would go, considering the future paper style, and it works quite nicely. Not to mention the little things like having the clouds being physically hung up. This might do a little bit more weirdness in the glitz pit, I would imagine, but otherwise I could see it being quite successful. In the images she produced, Knight also included white borders around the characters. The reason being for that was that's how they do it in Color Splash, but I am less inclined to that idea, but again, it's kind of a subjective point. Maybe they could even make it a choice where you can have the new white outline border if you want to, or you can choose to have it away and have it a lot more classical. As another fairly obvious point, lighting would need a bit of an overhaul. In the classic version, the lighting was just kind of there doing its purpose, but the newer games are generally much brighter or at least nicer lighting. Though I could also imagine, or at least have a bit of a wish for some more dynamic bloom lighting. If it doesn't fit everywhere because it would make shadows and such a real mess to play with, at least it could be possible in Keyhole Key, since there is that blooming light in the corner all the time. Maybe it's too situational, but I personally would quite like it. For the basics of visuals, that covers pretty much everything, but there are some more specific changes to the visuals that could be implemented. For example, cutscenes. Future games play more with angles and perspective, while the Thousand Year Door is fairly flat for most situations. At a stretch, maybe the intro cutscene could be revamped away from just book pages, though it still functions fairly fine on its own. But how's about normal cutscenes like Peach in Rogueport? Perhaps having the camera more angled behind the mysterious salesman to make them more mysterious, or having the angle of the camera move when the box is opened to swirl around into it. With the new 3D approach of future cutscenes in the Paper Mario series, Thousand Year Door could be finely tuned a little bit. There's also a lot of specific paper references, like boats flipping around in 2D, or rolling off the wallpaper in certain transitions, which could be played more in the 3D style. Maybe it's twirling a camera at these weird 3D angles, but then it goes perfectly into that flat angle to then do that little trick of it turning 2D and flipping around, like a little illusion. But perhaps more noticeable changes in the visual design can be utilised fully within the battle theatre stages. Continuing the joke of it being a set, maybe there could be some more dynamic layouts, such as a moving projection in the background more heavily relied on in certain battles. We get a little bit of that inkling in the train chapter, but it perhaps could be more emphasised there. With boosts in lighting, we could perhaps use additional spotlights to highlight elements of the battle, or we can especially revamp the mini cutscenes of stage hazards in battle, like the Shy Guy for example. Having him run backstage can be more heavily highlighted, either with new angles showing more of the Shy Guy's initial movements, or showing off more of what's going on backstage with some elaborate kerfuffle of noises and motion perhaps. But that cutscene shouldn't get too long because it is a battle after all. Generally, in battle we can get a lot more motion around the theatre. For example, when an audience member attacks or is highlighted for whatever reason, maybe having the angle be more twisted but always facing towards Mario to sell that sort of 2D imagery of everyone at a weird angle. Or how's about emphasizing attacks even more by adding extra visual elements and camera works to them? Beyond that, the 1000-Year Door doesn't need all too many changes or necessarily have space to fit them all in, so some really minor suggestions I kind of have is maybe having the Smorg boss incorporate maybe a little glue to make it a little more logically sensical, but it's not really much of a suggestion, and much of everything else is simply making textures more materially. Though one that is a bit of an exception to that actually is visual hints for areas of the world where the partners can interact. Obviously, we already have peeling wallpaper for Flurry's opportunity to use Gale Force, and we've got cracks in the walls for Bobbery's explosions, but how about hints of uneven floorboards in the ground to help find certain treasure? Or something more akin to that to make the world feel more real and less random. The puzzle of the fake wall in Rogueport can be more strongly hinted at by occasionally breaking the illusion during certain moments or angles of the camera. Hey, if you made it this far, consider subscribing if you're new, or following my new Instagram that I made at the beginning of this month because I'm trying to be more personable. Why did I have to say that in a high-pitched voice? Oh well, back to the video. But of course, having a Paper Mario 1000-Year Door remake doesn't just require a new slicker paint. For a remake to be a proper remake, it's gonna need some functionality changes and improvements over its classic original. So beyond just making the game look good, what tweaks can be done to make it play well too? What improvement tweaks can be added to the 1000-Year Door? Well, the first thing that comes to mind personally is backtracking. Clearly the biggest flaw from the game is the begrudgingly dull amount of backtracking required, most notably in Chapter 4 with Dupliss and Chapter 7 with General White. And these issues are fairly simple to improve. With the Dupliss section, you're expected to travel back and forth across the Twilight Forest either chasing Dupliss or discovering his secret. And though it is a substantial amount of the chapter, it can be skipped with a simple fast travel pipe from the beginning and end of the walkway. Perhaps it can even be added to most chapter locations for the sake of ease. Though for the case of Chapter 4, it may need some replacement pieces to fill in that time gap of work. As for General White, many people just wished for it to straight up be entirely skipped, having you find General White in Far Outpost straight away. And the best way I can imagine making that line up nicely is with a quick little wrapped up cutscene showing him popping up in every location, maybe seeing how he interacts at each place before ending it in Far Outpost ready for you to jump on his sleeping body for like 30 times. With that massive flaw covered over, here's some of the more smaller mechanical changes that can be added to improve how efficient and functional the general gameplay can be. For a start, save blocks. Recent remakes have removed the idea of save blocks or save books or whatever for just saving manually whenever you want on the pause screen, so save blocks similarly can be entirely replaced. I personally like them and I thought they were like a well-timed point to stop at each time you played it, but it's very much a missable thing with modern games. Star pieces, the hidden collectible hidden absolutely everywhere, I feel can have a bit more of a focused hunting radar system. I already suggested earlier some visual clues like loose floorboards or something like that, and we already have Miss Mouse as a treasure hunting hint, but maybe we could do with a little bit more. Maybe as she sniffs, she shows a logo of what she's sniffing, or a new star piece radar is introduced entirely for an easy 100%. Recipes. Recipes could get a refined catalogue of past attempts or telling combinations. Recipe lists can even be an extra thing you can find or can buy or can win to help you complete your recipe log by having you actually being given what you need to make each recipe, if that makes sense. The lottery has a lot of flaws. Basically everyone skips it or they try it and never win because it's basically impossible to win. The idea of it being one chance per day is interesting, though maybe it's too rare and the odds are far too low. A mini revamp would be nice to see, or even you picking your own ticket or number or something like that. A bit more interactivity. Generally, just improve it. It needs some work. Yoshi! Yoshi can come in all sorts of colors in this game as your little mini baby partner, and it's based on the amount of time they spend as an egg. Though it would be cool to see some more colors, like yellow, light blue, or purple. They're the three ones that I've been told are particularly not in the game. Yellow's a surprising one to me. Either way, you could even maybe have some kind of Yoshi merchant or fan or expert who can maybe even let you choose the color of your Yoshi either while it's still in the egg or afterwards as like a kind of Yoshi dye. Level ups, a simple little thing for when you level up, add a marker showing what the last upgrade was. Achievements. Apparently Mario and Luigi Paper Jam supposedly included achievements, which are easily enough placeable inside the Thousand Year Door, I feel. It's a simple little thing. A map marker. Some people have issues with where to go next, and some areas are confusing, like that wall illusion in Rogueport again. So maybe a simple little marker on the map could be added, or a little hint system, like if you ask Goombella, or an optional directional arrow that tells you where to go when you ask for it. Or here's a big one, stage effects. Back to battles again. Many disliked the random nature of some of the stage effects, and I quite like them, so I'm going to try and compromise keeping them around because they're quite a nice little spin on things. A nice compromise is actually making them more dodgeable. There are some that are really dodgeable, like trees falling off in the background of the stage, and that's fair enough, you get a fair enough hint, but some are a lot harder than others. So if you can make it that you can guard against all of them and a lot more easily and have more of a warning for each of them, that would already be a great boost in the right direction. But also, the stage effect of Mist is dispersible with Bobbery's explosions, and this, I believe, is the only case of being able to disperse a stage effect. So maybe make every stage effect dispersible in some capacity. Maybe like the icy attacks from the same Mist machines can be stopped by Vivian's fire. Just simple stuff like that. Another obvious add-on is a skip cutscene button. This is most prevalent when you're refighting the final boss again and again, but it'd be nice to do and much better than spamming through dialogue whenever you can. Though the I love you scene with the Beyonders on Keyhole Key, that can be kept at full length, of course. The Trouble Center needs better rewards, as they are often just not worth the trials. That was heartbreaking to try and 100%. I've also heard some balancing changes that should be put into effect, and these are mostly opinions of other people because I can't go crazy deep into these things, but here's what I've heard so far. For example, Power Bounce is seen to be far too strong and overly useful, whilst the final boss's HP is way too high. Maybe they're a little too overpowered, especially because with their HP being so high, Power Bounce is basically mandatory. Enemies between chapter 4 and 7 are also overly weak with too low HP for their actual scale. And there's an overabundance of recolored enemies. Newer replacements would be much better, even other enemies from Paper Mario for example. The partners themselves also get some flack, with points such as Koops being too weak and Miss Mouse too situational. Koops losing the flipping ability makes him much more viable, and Miss Mouse could maybe be buffed with her combat skills, or at least a little bit. Makes it better than just showing up to steal items and then disappearing again. But speaking of partners, old partners. We definitely need more fan service from them. Even if it's a little extra boost because it's a remake, it just makes sense. Because if the original Paper Mario doesn't get a remake, this would be the place for them to go anyway. It could just be a boosted reference to see them about more, like around the world, or maybe how about a reskin for certain characters, like a badge option or an item for them, or maybe they could even get their own mini extra section of gameplay. And speaking of extra sections, new remakes often add that new extra content with each new game. Here's some extra room that they could play around with. Paper Luigi, he has his own mini side quest literally as canon during Thousand Year Door. Maybe we can see a little bit more of that. Maybe not exactly the story he tells, but something like that could play along with that more. Paper Toad is also potentially an option. There's a lot more emphasis on Paper Toads in the later games, so maybe bringing them back into the older one could make more sense. It's an option. We could get some old partner minigames, as I just said before. Maybe each partner has their own minigame you gotta work through. You could get some extended Bowser moments or some extended Peach moments. Since they do have their own mini stories, it would be cool if you could go back to those elements and do certain things. Maybe there's an extra minigame with making the correct potion or something. There's a lot of content options for the Thousand Year Door that I feel there's just an abundance of options for a potential remake. So moving on, motion controls. Other new content can come from the console it's on, and this is most likely going to be on the Switch, which means there's potential for motion controls, perhaps as an extra option for controls and certainly not mandatory. Maybe you could have some HD rumble effect for some new minigames. It's a simple little thing, but it'd be nice to see some new stuff. Or how's about some new badges? New content can always be made by just extending old concepts, and we've long lost badges in the Paper Mario series. But this game can be the one that brings them all back, perhaps with some new options as well. An easy one to go with is more sound effect badges for more references. Same with the visual ones. In changing the color of his outfit, there could be multiple references either from Paper Mario's future or just any Mario stuff that could just be extended as a nice little homage to things. What if there's a badge that literally mimics the more classic style of visuals? You put it on and you see the old school style of Paper Mario Thousand Year Door if you wanted to. Or it changes the whole design of the enemies entirely. Maybe it replaces replaces any new enemies coming in and replaces them with the recolored versions of the classic. It's something like that, like a retro badge kind of idea. As an idea for a new prize for something really rare, like beating the Pit of 100 Trials, which needs a better reward anyway, or maybe the best arcade puzzle, maybe you could get a super overpowered badge that lets Mario or his partner attack twice per round. We could also get some badges that maybe reference back to Paper Mario 64, like the spin dash ability, which would be great to see come back. Or we could get maybe a kind of visual effects badge that has extra effects on Mario's hammer or his jump. For example, a simple one is hitting with a hammer causes color to splash out of it. Simple little reference to a future Paper Mario game. And after all of that, the BP amounts could also be finely tuned to be a little bit more balanced. Other things could be a post-game arena that allows you to refight older bosses in their stronger forms, and that would be amazing to see. And one that I'm particularly interested in, if it does come to be, is New Game Plus. Maybe if you complete the game and start it over again, you can bring all of your badges or your coins over, or something like that. Maybe there's even a new game mode where enemies are more likely to hold badges, or they full-on just use badges all the time to upgrade themselves, making the game more harder and more diverse, when programming-wise it's just plonking badges onto certain enemies across the game. Potentially, there are a lot of options for a Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door remake. The likelihood of this game is on the fence. We keep saying it over and over again, but the official new director of Paper Mario's future does now know of the vast interest in the idea of a remake, though this was years ago with a Game Explain interview. But the fact that it was years ago means maybe now's about the time that it would pop up. Who knows? Nintendo does seem to be making some cooler decisions these days now that they're handling the Switch much better than the Wii U, and it's been a good few years since we saw a new Paper Mario, so maybe it's all lining up. Who knows, it's all still up in the air, it's a clear-cut moneymaker, and the demand is clearly very high. It could potentially require a lot of work, but it's something I imagine many fans would want, and its existence would rile up Paper Mario fans, not just for more of a classic-style game, but the potential rise of another game of this type. But even if that potential fantasy doesn't come to fruition, a Paper Mario Thousand Year Door remake makes some logical sense, and it's less of a stretch to hope for. We'll just have to see if Nintendo is up for the challenge and ready to breathe new life into what many think is one of the best Nintendo games ever made. But we'll just have to see. Those are mostly my thoughts. Let me know any of your changes you'd like to see in a new Thousand Year Door remake. Thanks again to Rougher Knight for these amazing images, and for now, my name's been Daz, you didn't really care, and I'll see you in a bit.